The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. As Kaelin Vorne stepped out of the courthouse, her boots clicked against the wet pavement, each step deliberate, as if measuring the weight of her victory. The sky above was a bruised gray, heavy with the threat of another downpour, but Kaelin didn't care. She had won. She had won. The building, that crumbling relic of greed and betrayal, was hers now. 2 days ago, Mirabel Duskew had tried to evict her, to strip her of everything. Now, Kaelin owned the very walls Mirabel had thought to wield against her. The irony tasted sharp, like blood on her tongue. Kaelin's mind worked like a machine, gears grinding through every detail of the past week. She saw it all again. The eviction notice taped to her door, the smug curl of Mirabel's lips when Kaelin confronted her, the way the landlord's manicured nails tapped impatiently on her desk. "You're behind on rent, darling," Mirabel had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This isn't personal, just business." Kaelin had known better. It was personal. It was always personal with Mirabel. The woman didn't just manage properties. She collected power, hoarded it like a dragon with gold. Kaelin had seen the glint in her eyes, the hunger for control. But Mirabel had underestimated her. Big mistake. Kaelin's apartment was a small, 5th floor walk-up in the heart of the city's oldest district. The walls were thin, the pipes groaned, and the radiator hissed like an angry cat. But it was hers, had been hers for 3 years. A sanctuary carved out of a life that had never been kind. She'd painted the walls a soft blue, hung shelves for her books, and kept a single potted plant by the window, its leaves straining toward the sliver of sunlight that slipped through the alley. When the eviction notice arrived, it felt like a knife to the gut. Unpaid rent, it claimed. Citing months Kaelin knew she'd paid. She had the receipts, the bank statements, the proof. But Mirabel didn't care about proof. She wanted Kaelin out. Why? That was the question that gnawed at her, kept her awake as the city hummed outside her window. Why her? Why now, Kaelin's ally? Tessa Rogue had been the one to point her toward the truth. Tessa lived 2 floors down, a no-nonsense woman with a blunt bob and a knack for numbers. She worked as a freelance accountant, her apartment cluttered with ledgers and spreadsheets. "Mirabel's up to something," Tessa had said, her voice low over a cup of bitter coffee in her kitchen. "I've seen her books. They don't add up." Tessa had pulled out a stack of papers, leases, tax records, maintenance logs. She's been siphoning money from the building's accounts for years, skimming a little here, a little there. But now, she's getting sloppy. Kaelin's pulse had quickened as Tessa laid it out. Mirabel was planning to sell the building, to cash out and disappear. The evictions were a cover, a way to clear out tenants who might ask questions. Kaelin, with her stubborn streak and her habit of noticing too much, was a threat. The plan had formed quickly, born of desperation and a spark of rage. Kaelin wasn't just going to fight the eviction. She was going to take everything. She spent nights digging through public records, tracking Mirabel's financial trail. She found shell companies, hidden accounts, a web of lies so intricate it was almost beautiful. Almost. Tessa helped, her fingers flying over her laptop as she uncovered discrepancies in Mirabel's tax filings. "She's leverage to the hilt," Tessa said, her voice tight with excitement. "The building's mortgage is underwater. She's desperate for cash." That was the opening Kaelin needed. She didn't have much, her savings were meager. Her job as a data analyst barely kept her afloat, but she had something Mirabel didn't resolve. Kaelin's first move was to contact a lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara who worked pro bono for tenants' rights. Clara had a reputation for tearing through landlords like a storm through a paper house. Mirabel's not just breaking the law, Clara said, her pen tapping a rhythm on her desk. She's practically begging to be caught. Clara helped Kaelin file an injunction, freezing Mirabel's ability to sell the building until the eviction disputes were resolved. That bought time for Kaelin to pull together every cent she could. She sold her car, cashed out her $401k, took a loan she knew she couldn't afford. Tessa chipped in, too, emptying her savings with a shrug. "We're in this together," she said. "Besides, I'm tired of Mirabel's games." The auction was a blur. Kaelin stood at the back of the room, her heart pounding as the bids climbed. Mirabel was there, her elegant frame draped in a silk suit, her eyes narrowing when she saw Kaelin. "She knows," Kaelin thought. "She knows I'm here to ruin her." The building's price was low too low, thanks to Mirabel's mismanagement. Kaelin's bid, cobbled together from every resource she had, was enough, just enough. When the gavel fell, the room went silent. Mirabel's face was a mask of fury, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Kaelin met her gaze and smiled. Checkmate. Now, standing outside the courthouse, Kaelin felt the weight of it settle into her bones. She owned the building. She owned Mirabel's legacy. But the victory was hollow. Owning the building didn't. Erase the months of fear, the sleepless nights, the gnawing sense that Mirabel wasn't done. Not yet. Kaelin's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Tessa. "Meet me at the building. Found something you need to see." The building loomed ahead as Kaelin approached, its brick facade cracked but proud. Tessa was waiting in the lobby, her face pale. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, holding up a folder. "I found it in Mirabel's office. She left in a hurry after the auction." Kaelin opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages. Blueprints, contracts, a name she didn't recognize, Vorne Holdings. Her own last name, tied to a company she'd never heard of. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. Tessa shook her head. "I don't know. But Mirabel's been playing a longer game than we thought." Kaelin's mind raced, piecing together fragments. Vorne Holdings, the eviction, Mirabel's desperation. It wasn't just about money. It was personal, deeper than she'd imagined. She thought of her mother, dead 5 years now, who'd once owned property in this city. Property she'd lost under murky circumstances. Kaelin had never asked questions. Grief had buried her curiosity. But now, staring at her own name in Mirabel's files, she felt a spark of something raw. Betrayal. She looked at Tessa, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "We're not done. Not by a long shot." The next morning, Kaelin woke to a knock at her door. She opened it to find a man in a cheap suit, his smile too wide. "Miss Vorne, I represent Vorne Holdings. We'd like to discuss your recent acquisition." Her stomach twisted. She didn't know these people, but they knew her, and they wanted the building. "Tell your boss I'm not selling," she said, her voice cold. The man's smile didn't falter. "Oh, it's not about selling. It's about ownership." Kaelin spent the day digging deeper, her apartment a mess of papers and coffee cups. Tessa joined her, their laptops glowing in the dim light. They found Vorne Holdings registered to an offshore account, its origins obscured. But one name kept appearing, Mirabel Duskew. "She's not just the landlord," Tessa said, her voice tight. "She's connected to whoever's behind this. And they're not happy you took their prize." Kaelin's fingers tightened around her pen. She'd won the building, but the war was just beginning. That night, Kaelin stood on the roof, the city sprawling below. The air was cold, sharp with the promise of winter. She thought of Mirabel, of the elegant woman who'd tried to break her. "You thought I was weak," she whispered to the wind. "You thought I'd fold. But Kaelin Vorne didn't fold. She fought. She planned. She won. And now, with the building in her name and Mirabel's secrets in her hands, she was ready for the next move. Whatever it was, she'd face it head-on. No mercy. The city hummed below, a restless beast of lights and noise, as Kaelin Vorne stood in her apartment, the folder from Mirabel's office spread across her table. The papers stared back at her, taunting with their secrets. Vorne Holdings. Her name, twisted into something she didn't understand, linked to a company that shouldn't exist. Her fingers traced the edges of a blueprint, the buildings. Skeleton laid bare hidden rooms, sealed off spaces, marked in red ink. What were you hiding, Mirabel? The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of unanswered questions. She hadn't slept properly in days. Her mind too sharp, too relentless to rest. Tessa Roque arrived just after midnight, her face drawn, a laptop tucked under her arm. I dug deeper, she said, setting the device on the table. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Vorne Holdings isn't just a shell company. It's tied to a network offshore. Accounts, real estate deals, even some sketchy political donations. Kaelin leaned forward, her pulse quickening. And Mirabel? Tessa's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up a grainy photo. Mirabel Duskew, elegant as ever, shaking hands with a man in a suit. The timestamp was old 10 years ago. The man's face was unfamiliar, but his name was scrawled in the corner, Elliot Vorne. Kaelin's breath caught. Her father's brother. Her uncle. Dead, or so she'd been told. Since she was a child. You never mentioned family, Tessa said, her tone careful. Like she was stepping around broken glass. Kaelin's jaw tightened. Because there isn't any. My mom raised me alone. Said my uncle died in a car accident before I was born. Tessa raised an eyebrow, pointing at the photo. Doesn't look dead to me. Not then, at least. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Kaelin's mother had been a quiet woman, worn down by life, her stories vague when it came to family. Kaelin had never pushed, never questioned. Now she wished she had. What else didn't you tell me? The next morning, Kaelin met Clara, her lawyer, at a diner across town. The place smelled of burnt coffee and grease. The kind of spot where secrets could be whispered without drawing eyes. Clara slid into the booth, her sharp gaze scanning Kaelin's face. You look like hell, she said bluntly. Kaelin managed a thin smile. Feel like it too. She pushed the folder across the table. Vorne Holdings. It's connected to Mirabel. And my family? Maybe? Clara's fingers paused on the folder, her expression unreadable. This is bigger than an eviction scam, Kaelin. If your name's tied to this, you're not just a tenant who got lucky. You're a target. Clara's warning echoed as Kaelin walked back to the building. The streets were alive with the city's pulse-honking cabs, shouting vendors, the low hum of a subway beneath her feet. But she felt detached, her mind slicing through the noise, analyzing. Mirabel didn't just want me out. She wanted me erased. The thought was cold, precise, but it sparked a flare of anger deep in her chest. She wasn't prey. She was a predator now, and Mirabel had made her that way. When she reached the building, a new notice was taped to the front door. Inspection. Scheduled. Vorne Holdings representative. Tomorrow. Tessa was waiting in Kaelin's apartment, her laptop open to a spreadsheet. I tracked the money, she said without preamble. Vorne Holdings has been buying up properties in this district for years. Small deals. Under the radar. Your building was the last piece. Kaelin frowned, her mind racing. Last piece. Of what? Tessa turned the laptop toward her. A map of the district, red dots marking properties. They formed a rough circle, with Kaelin's building at the center. They're planning something big. Redevelopment, maybe, or something shuttier. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. And Mirabel's their front. Tessa nodded. But she's not the top. Someone else is pulling the strings. That night, Kaelin couldn't sleep. She stood by her window. The city's glow casting shadows across her face. The plant on her sill was wilting, its leaves curling inward. She hadn't watered it. In days, neglect, she thought, her mind drifting to her mother, to the half-truths that had shaped her life. A memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden, her mother's hands, trembling as she signed papers in their old apartment. "It's for your future," she'd said, her voice brittle. Kaelin had been too young to understand, but now the pieces clicked. Her mother had lost something: property, money, maybe more. And Mirabel was there, somewhere in the shadows, always in the shadows. The inspection came too soon. The Vorne Holdings representative was the same man from before, his cheap suit replaced by a sharper one, his smile just as false. "Miss Vorne," he said, extending a hand she didn't take. "I'm Mr. Hale. We're here to assess the property's condition." Kaelin crossed her arms, her voice ice. "You mean you're here to scare me?" Hale's smile twitched. "Misunderstandings can be costly. We'd prefer to avoid them." Behind him, two men in work boots lingered, their eyes scanning the lobby like they were mapping it. Not inspectors, Kaelin thought. Enforcers. Tessa had warned her to stay calm, to play along. But Kaelin's blood was fire. She let Hale and his men wander the building, trailing them at a distance. They lingered in the basement, their flashlights sweeping over rusted pipes and cracked concrete. Kaelin's blueprint flashed in her mind, those hidden rooms, marked in red. When Hale paused near a sealed wall, tapping it with a knuckle, Kaelin's stomach twisted. "Find what you're looking for," she asked, her voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. Hale turned, his eyes glinting. "Not yet. But we will." Clara called that afternoon, her voice urgent. "They're filing a claim against your ownership. Says the auction was irregular. It's a stall tactic, but it's got teeth." Kaelin gripped her phone, her knuckles white. "Can you fight it?" "I'm already on it," Clara said. "But you need to watch your back. These people don't play fair." Kaelin hung up, her mind spinning. She thought of Mirabel, of the photo with her uncle, of the blueprint secrets. They're not getting this building. Not now. Not ever. Tessa came by that evening, her face grim. "I found something else," she said, pulling up a scanned document. A deed, dated 20 years ago. Kaelin's mother's name was on it, tied to a property that matched the building's address. "Your mom owned this place," Tessa said. "Before Mirabel, before Vorne Holdings." Kaelin's chest tightened, a writhe spreading. Her mother had never mentioned it. Not once. "Why?" "There's more," Tessa said, her voice soft. "The deed transfer wasn't clean. Looks like coercion. Maybe blackmail." Kaelin's vision blurred, not with tears, but with fury. Mirabel hadn't just targeted her. She targeted her family. The eviction, the lies, the hidden rooms, it was all connected. She stood, pacing the small apartment, her boots scuffing the worn floor. "We need to find Mirabel," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "She's the key," Tessa nodded, but her eyes were wary. "She's gone underground. No one's seen her since the auction." Kaelin stopped, her gaze locking on the blueprint. "Then we start where she left off. Those hidden rooms. Whatever's in there. It's what she's protecting." The basement was cold, the air thick with dust and damp. Kaelin and Tessa moved quietly, their flashlights cutting through the dark. The sealed wall from the blueprint was there, its bricks mismatched, newer than the rest. Kaelin ran her hand over it, feeling for weakness. "We need tools," she whispered. Tessa nodded, already pulling a crowbar from her bag. Practical Tessa. They worked in silence, the scrape of metal against brick echoing in the empty space. When the wall gave way, a hollow space opened, revealing a narrow room. Inside, filing cabinets, locked tight, and a single safe, its dial glinting in the flashlight's beam. Jackpot. Kaelin's heart pounded as she knelt before the safe. She wasn't a thief, wasn't a spy, but she'd come too far to stop. "Can you crack it?" she asked Tessa. Tessa's lips quirked. "I'm an accountant, not a safe cracker, but I'll try." They worked for hours, Tessa's steady hands testing combinations. Kaelin sorting through the cabinets. She found leases, contracts, letters all tied to Vorne Holdings, all tied to her family. Her mother's signature, trembling, on a document surrendering the building. When the safe clicked open, Tessa let out a low whistle. Inside was a ledger, its pages filled with names, dates, payments. Mirabel's name was everywhere, but so was another, Elliot Vorne. Kaelin's hands shook as she read. Her uncle hadn't died. He'd been here, in this city, working with Mirabel, building an empire on her mother's ruin. And now they want it back. She looked at Tessa, her voice raw. "We're not just fighting Mirabel. We're fighting my own blood." The ledger felt heavy in Kaelin Vorne's hands, its pages brittle with secrets. The basement's damp air clung to her skin as she stood over the open safe, her flashlight casting jagged shadows across the hidden room. Names, dates, payments, each entry a piece of a puzzle she hadn't asked to solve. Elliot Vorne. Her uncle, a ghost from her mother's stories, alive and tangled in Mirabel Duskew's web. Kaelin's mind sliced through the shock, analytical, relentless. He betrayed us. They both did. Tessa Roque stood beside her, her face pale in the dim light, the crowbar still in her hand. "What now?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. Kaelin didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Back in her apartment, Kaelin spread the ledger's contents across her table, papers spilling like leaves in a storm. Tessa sat across from her, her laptop glowing as she cross-referenced names from the ledger. "Your uncle's been busy," Tessa said, her fingers pausing on the keys. "He's not just a silent partner. He's the money behind Vorne Holdings. Shell companies, offshore accounts, it's all him." Kaelin's jaw tightened, a flicker of rage breaking through her. "Come." "And Mirabel?" Tessa's eyes flicked to the screen. "She's his friend, the face of the operation. But Elliot's the one calling the shots." Kaelin stared at a photo clipped to the ledger, a younger Elliot, his smile sharp, standing beside a woman who wasn't Mirabel, her mother. The sight hit like a punch, raw and unforgiving. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" The city outside was restless, rain drumming against the windows as Kaelin pieced together the past. Her mother had owned this building, had fought to keep it, only to lose it to Elliot and Mirabel's schemes. The ledger detailed it all: coerced signatures, forged documents, payments to silence anyone who asked questions. Kaelin's fingers curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. She'd been a child when her mother lost everything. Too young to understand the late-night arguments, the tears, the way her mother's hands shook when she spoke of family business. They took it all from her. Now, they wanted the building back. Wanted Kaelin gone. She wouldn't let them win. Not again. Tessa's voice broke the silence. "There's something else," she said, turning her laptop. An email, intercepted from one of Mirabel's accounts. It was brief, coded, but one line stood out. "The vault must stay sealed. No mistakes." Kaelin's eyes snapped to the blueprint on her table, the hidden rooms marked in red. "There's more down there," she said, her voice cold, certain. "Something they're protecting." Tessa nodded, her practical calm a tether to Kaelin's storm. "We need to go back. Tonight." Kaelin didn't hesitate. She grabbed her jacket. The ledger, the blueprint. No more running. The basement was darker than before, the air thicker, as if it knew what they were about to uncover. Kaelin and Tessa moved past the broken wall, their flashlights sweeping the narrow room. The safe had been a start, but the blueprint showed another space, deeper, hidden behind a false panel. Kaelin's fingers found the seam, barely visible in the brick. She pressed, and a low groan echoed as the panel shifted, revealing a rusted metal door. Locked, of course. Tessa knelt, pulling a set of lockpicks from her bag. "Don't ask," she muttered, catching Kaelin's raised eyebrow. Her hands were steady, precise, the lock clicking open after minutes that felt like hours. The door swung inward, revealing a small chamber. No files, no safe, just a single metal box, bolted to the floor, its surface scratched and dented. Kaelin's heart pounded as she approached, her flashlight catching the glint of a keypad. "High tech for a crumbling building." Tessa frowned, her voice tight. "This isn't just about money. Whatever's in there, it's personal." Kaelin punched in a code, her mother's birthday, a desperate guess. The box beeped, red light flashing. Wrong. She tried her own birthday. Another beep. Think, Kaelin. She entered the date from the deed, the day her mother lost the building. The lock clicked, and the lid hissed open. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax. Kaelin's hands trembled as she broke it open, revealing a letter in her mother's handwriting. "Kaelin, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I should have told you." The words blurred as Kaelin read, her chest tight with grief and fury. Her mother had known about Elliot's betrayal, had fought him in secret, hiding the truth to protect Kaelin. The letter mentioned a trust, funds set aside in Kaelin's name, hidden from Elliot and Mirabel, enough to buy back what they stole. But there was more, a warning. Elliot will never stop. He's dangerous. Trust no one. Kaelin's vision swam, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. She handed the letter to Tessa, who read it in silence, her face grim. "This trust," Tessa said, folding the paper. "It's real. I found records of it in the ledger. Offshore, untouchable. Millions." Kaelin's mind raced, calculating. The trust was her leverage, her weapon, but it also made her a bigger target. "They'll come for me now." She looked at Tessa, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "We need to secure the trust, and we need to find Elliot." The next day, Kaelin met Clara at the diner again, the letter tucked in her bag. Clara's eyes widened as she read, her coffee forgotten. "This changes everything," she said. "If you can access that trust, you're not just holding the building, you're holding their entire operation hostage." Kaelin nodded, her mind already 3 steps ahead. "But they'll fight dirty. They already are." Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "Then we fight dirtier. I'll start the paperwork to claim the trust. You focus on staying safe." Kaelin almost laughed. Safe? There was no safe, not anymore. Back at the building, Kaelin found another notice on her door. Cease and desist, Vorne Holdings. They were escalating, claiming her ownership was fraudulent, demanding she vacate immediately. Elliot's move. She tore the notice down, her fingers shaking with rage. She'd bought the building fair and square, but fairness didn't matter to people like her uncle. Tessa was waiting in the lobby, her face tense. Hale was here again, with more men. They're watching the building. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. Let them watch. They'll see what happens when you cross a Vorne. That night, Kaelin sat alone in her apartment, the letter in her hands. Her mother's words burned, each one a spark of pain and purpose. I should have told you. Kaelin's detachment cracked, raw emotions spilling through. She wasn't just fighting for the building anymore. She was fighting for her mother, for the life they'd been denied, for revenge. Her phone buzzed, a blocked number. She answered, her voice cold. Who is this? A man's voice, smooth and sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Kaelin. It's been a long time. Elliot, you're not getting. The building, she said, her tone ice. He laughed, low and cruel. It's not about the building, niece. It's about family. Kaelin hung up, her heart racing but her mind clear. Elliot was close to close. She called Tessa, her voice urgent. We need to move. Now they met in the basement, armed with tools and determination. The metal box was still there, but Kaelin's instinct screamed trap. She checked the room, her flashlight catching a glint wires, barely visible, rigged to the door. They're watching. Tessa's hands were steady as she discerned the trap. Her accountant's precision turned to survival. They're not playing, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. Kaelin nodded, her voice a whisper. Neither are we. They worked through the night, cataloging every document, every clue. The ledger revealed more properties, payoffs, a network of corruption that stretched across the city. Elliot's name was on every page, but so was Mirabel's, her elegant signature a thread tying it all together. Kaelin's phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. She ignored it, but the voicemail came seconds later. Mirabel's voice, smooth and venomous. You're in over your head, darling. Walk away, or you'll lose more than a building. Kaelin deleted the message, her lips curling. Try me. By dawn. Kaelin and Tessa had a plan. The trust was their leverage, but the hidden rooms were their proof. They'd take it all to Clara, build a case that would bury Elliot and Mirabel. But as they left the basement, footsteps echoed above. Heavy, deliberate, not tenants. Kaelin's hand went to the crowbar, her pulse steady despite the danger. Tessa, she whispered, get ready. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open, and a shadow fell across the steps. Time's up. The basement stairs creaked under the weight of the approaching shadow, each step a deliberate threat. Kaelin Vorne gripped the crowbar, her knuckles white, her heart a steady drumbeat of resolve. No fear. Beside her, Tessa Roke crouched, her flashlight angled to blind whoever came through the door. The air was thick, charged with the promise of violence. Kaelin's mind was a blade, cutting through the panic, calculating. Elliot's men, or Mirabel's, doesn't matter. They're not taking this from me. The door swung open, revealing Mr. Hale, his cheap smile replaced by a cold, predatory glint. Two men flanked him, their bulk filling the doorway, hands resting on concealed weapons. Miss Vorne, Hale said, his voice smooth as oil. You've been busy. Kaelin's grip tightened. Her voice ice. You're trespassing. Get out. Hale's laugh was sharp, cutting. This building belongs to Vorne Holdings. You're the trespasser, darling. Tessa shifted, her flashlight catching Hale's eyes, making him flinch. Small victories. Kaelin stepped forward, the crowbar heavy in her hand. I own this building. Court says so. You want it, take it through the law. Hale's smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked to the ledger in Tessa's bag. That's a dangerous book you've got there. People get hurt over secrets like that. Kaelin's pulse spiked, but her voice stayed steady. People like my mother? Hale's expression flickered just for a moment. Got you. Before he could respond, Tessa lunged, her flashlight swinging like a club. Hale dodged, but the distraction gave Kaelin an opening. She swung the crowbar, catching one of the men in the knee. He crumpled, cursing, as the other reached for his gun. The fight was quick, messy. Tessa tackled the second man, her practical strength surprising him as she drove her elbow into his jaw. Kaelin faced Hale, her crowbar raised, her eyes burning. "Tell Elliot I'm coming for him." Hale backed away, his hands raised, but his smile was back. Sharp and venomous. "You're playing a game you can't win, Kaelin. Family always loses." He retreated, his men limping after him, leaving the basement door swinging. Kaelin's chest heaved, adrenaline coursing, but her mind was already moving. They'll be back. Tessa sank against the wall, her breath ragged. "That was two. Close," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Kaelin nodded, her gaze on the ledger. "We need to move this somewhere safe." They gathered the documents, the blueprint, the letter, everything that tied Elliot and Mirabel to the building, to her mother's ruin. Tessa's apartment was too obvious, Clara's office too far. Kaelin's eyes fell on the metal box, still open in the hidden room. "There," she said. "We hide it where they're afraid to look." They worked fast, sealing the documents back in the box, resetting the trap they'd disarmed. Kaelin's mother's letter burned in her memory, its warning clear: trust no one. But Tessa was different. Tessa had fought beside her, risked everything. Kaelin glanced at her friend, her voice low. "Thank you." Tessa's lips quirked. A rare smile. "Don't get soft on me now, Vorne." The moment broke the tension, but only for a second. The city outside was waking, and time was running out. Clara met them at the diner at dawn, her face grim as Kaelin recounted the fight. "They're desperate," Clara said, her pen tapping a nervous rhythm. "Hale's not just muscle, he's Elliot's fixer. If he's here, Elliot's close." Kaelin pushed the letter across the table. "My mother knew. She left a trust. Millions. Enough to bury them." Clara's eyes scanned the paper, her expression hardening. "This is dynamite, Kaelin. But you need to claim it legally. Offshore trusts are tricky. Elliot's probably already trying to block you." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then we move faster." The trust was the key, but accessing it meant navigating a maze of legal barriers. Clara worked her contacts, pulling strings to verify Kaelin's claim, while Kaelin and Tessa dug deeper into the ledger. The names they found were a who's who of the city's underbelly: politicians, developers, even a judge. Elliot's reach is long. One name stood out: a lawyer, Victor Crane, who'd handled the original deed transfer from Kaelin's mother. "He's still practicing," Tessa said, her laptop open to a law firm's website. "Downtown. Big money?" Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "Then he's our next stop." The law firm was a glass tower, its lobby cold and sterile. Kaelin walked in alone, her boots echoing on the marble floor, her face a mask of calm, analytical, detached. The receptionist barely looked up, but Kaelin's voice cut through. "I need to see Victor Crane." "Now?" The woman hesitated, then buzzed an intercom. Moments later, Crane appeared, a tall man, silver-haired, with eyes that saw too much. "Miss Vorne," he said, his tone smooth, dangerous. "I was wondering when you'd come." Kaelin's stomach twisted, but she held his gaze. "You knew my mother. You helped take her building." Crane's smile was thin. "Business. Miss Vorne. Nothing personal." Liar. Crane's office was all leather and mahogany, a shrine to wealth. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, as Kaelin laid out the ledger's evidence. "You signed the papers. You knew they were forged." Crane didn't flinch. "Your mother made her choices. She walked away." Kaelin leaned forward, her voice low, raw. She was forced. By you. By Elliot. By Mirabel. Crane's eyes flickered, the first crack in his composure. Careful, Miss Vorne. Accusations like that have consequences. Kaelin smiled, cold and sharp. So do secrets. She left the office with a warning ringing in her ears. Crane's parting words. Elliot doesn't forgive, neither does Mirabel. Outside, the city felt different, its pulse hostile. Kaelin called Tessa, her voice urgent. Crane's in deep. He knows everything. Tessa was waiting at the building, her face tense. We've got a problem. Someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take anything, just left this. She held up a note, handwritten in elegant script. Stop digging, or you'll be buried. Mirabel's signature was unmistakable. Kaelin's blood ran hot, her detachment shuddering. They think they can scare me. She and Tessa returned to the basement, checking the box. It was untouched, the trap intact. But the air felt wrong, heavy with the sense of being watched. Kaelin's phone buzzed, a text from Clara. Trust claim filed. Hearing tomorrow. Be ready, tomorrow. One day to end this, or lose everything. Kaelin looked at Tessa, her voice steady despite the fire inside. We're going to that hearing, and we're bringing the ledger. The courthouse was a maze of echoes, its halls cold and unforgiving. Kaelin stood beside Clara, the ledger hidden in her bag, her eyes scanning the crowd. No sign of Elliot or Mirabel, but Hale was there, his smile ablaze in the fluorescent light. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, called the hearing to order. Clara presented the trust, the letter, the evidence of fraud. Kaelin's heart pounded, but her face was stone. No weakness. Then Hale stood, his voice smooth as he presented a counterclaim. Miss Vorne's ownership is invalid. The building belongs to Vorne Holdings, duly represented by Elliot Vorne. Kaelin's breath caught. He's here. Elliot stepped forward, his presence commanding, his eyes so like her mother's it hurt. Kaelin, he said, his voice low, meant for her alone. You should have stayed out of this. She met his gaze, her voice a whisper of steel. You should have left my mother alone. The judge called for order, but the air crackled with tension. Clara leaned in, her voice urgent. We've got them. The ledger's enough to sink their claim. But Kaelin's eyes were on Elliot, on the man who torn her family apart. Not enough. I want him broken. The hearing stretched on, documents piling up, voices raising. Clara was a storm, dismantling Hale's arguments, exposing the fraud in the ledger's pages. Kaelin testified, her voice steady, raw, recounting her mother's letter, the hidden rooms, the threats. Then Mirabel appeared, gliding into the courtroom like a shadow. Her eyes locked on Kaelin, her smile venomous. You're stubborn, darling, she said, her voice carrying. Like your mother. Kaelin's hands clenched, but she held her ground. And you're done, Mirabel, like my uncle. The judge's gavel fell, her ruling clear. The trust was Kaelin's, the building hers. Vorne Holdings claim dismissed. Elliot's face was a mask of fury. Mirabel's a study in cold defeat. Kaelin stood outside the courthouse, the city alive around her, the weight of victory heavy but sweet. Tessa was beside her, her smile quiet but real. We did it, she said. Kaelin nodded, her eyes on the horizon. For now, she thought of her mother, of the letter, of the fight that wasn't over. Elliot was still out there. Mirabel too. But I'm not done either. The city's pulse was a low hum as Kaelin Vorne stood on the roof of her building, the night air sharp against her skin. The courthouse victory was hers, the trust secured, the building legally bound to her name. but the weight of it all her. Mother's letter, Elliot's cold eyes, Mirabel's venomous smile pressed against her chest. They're not done. Her fingers traced the edge of the ledger, tucked inside her jacket. Its pages a map of betrayal. She'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. Kaelin's mind churned, slicing through the quiet, planning her next move. Elliot's out there. Mirabel too. And they don't lose gracefully. Tessa Roque joined her, her boots scuffing. The gravel rooftop, her face etched with the same restless energy. Clara called, Tessa said, her voice low, practical. The judge's ruling spooked Vorne Holdings. They're pulling back, regrouping. But they're not gone. Kaelin nodded, her gaze fixed on the city's jagged skyline. They'll come for the trust. It's too much money to let go. Tessa's lips pressed into a thin line. Or they'll come for you. That note from Mirabel wasn't a bluff. Kaelin's jaw tightened, a spark of raw fury breaking through her. Come, let them try. The next morning, Kaelin woke to a new message on her phone, a voice recording from a blocked number. Mirabel's voice, smooth and sharp, cut through the static. You think you've won, darling. You've only made yourself a bigger target. Ask your uncle about family loyalty. Kaelin deleted the message, her hands steady but her pulse racing. Family loyalty. The words burned, twisting the knife of her mother's betrayal. She called Clara, her voice clipped. Mirabel's. Taunting me, she mentioned Elliot. They're planning something. Clara's response was immediate, her tone sharp. Get to my office. Now. We need to lock down the trust before they move. Clara's office was a fortress of files and coffee cups, the air thick with the scent of ink and determination. She spread documents across her desk, trust agreements, bank records, the ledger's damning evidence. The trust is yours, legally, Clara said, her pen tapping a rhythm. But Elliot's lawyers are circling. They're claiming you coerced your mother's signature. Kaelin's laugh was cold, bitter. Coerced? They forced her out. They ruined her. Clara's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. We'll prove it. The ledger. Your mother's letter, it's enough. But we need to find Elliot. He's the head of the snake. Tessa was waiting outside, her laptop under her arm, her face tense. I traced Mirabel's last known address, she said, pulling up a map on her screen. A penthouse, downtown. She's been off the grid since the hearing, but her accounts are active. She's moving money fast. Kaelin's mind clicked, analyzing. She's running, or covering something up. Tessa nodded, her fingers flying over the keys. There's a meeting tonight. Vorne Holdings. Private club. Old money. Elliot's name's on the guest list. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, a plan forming. Then we crash it. The club was a relic of the city's elite, all dark wood and velvet curtains. Its air heavy with cigar smoke and secrets. Kaelin wore a borrowed dress, black and sharp, her hair pulled back to match her steel resolve. Tessa was beside her, her practical demeanor hidden behind a sleek blazer, her eyes scanning the room. We don't belong here. But Kaelin didn't care. She was here for answers, for blood. A doorman stopped them, his gaze skeptical. But Kaelin's voice was ice. We're expected. Vorne Holdings. The name was a key, and he stepped aside, unaware of the storm he'd let in. The meeting was in a private room, its door guarded by a man who looked more like a mercenary than a valet. Kaelin caught a glimpse of Elliot inside, his silver hair catching the chandelier's light. His laugh low and confident. System, confident. Mirabel stood at the far end of the room, her silk dress gleaming like oil. Her eyes locked on Kaelin the moment she entered. She knew we were coming. Kaelin's heart pounded, but her face was a mask of calm. Mirabel. she said, her voice low, sharp. Where's Elliot? Mirabel's smile was a blade, elegant and deadly. You're bold, darling. I'll give you that. Tessa stepped forward, her voice steady. Answer the question. Elliot emerged from the shadows, his presence heavy, commanding. Right here, knees. His eyes were cold, but his smile was cruel. You're persistent. Like your mother. Kaelin's hand twitched toward the ledger in her bag, her mother's letter burning in her memory. You stole her life, she said, her voice raw, breaking through her detachment. You and Mirabel. Why? Elliot's laugh was soft, dangerous. She was weak. She didn't deserve what she had. Kaelin stepped closer, her fury a living thing. She was your sister. Mirabel moved between them, her voice silk and venom. Family is just a word. Kaelin, power is real. The room crackled with tension, the air thick with unspoken threats. Tessa's hand rested on Kaelin's arm, a silent warning to stay calm. But Kaelin's blood was fire. The ledger proves everything, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Fraud. Blackmail. You're finished. Elliot's eyes narrowed, but his smile didn't fade. Proof means nothing without power, Kaelin. And you're out of your league. He nodded to the guard, who stepped forward, hand on his weapon. Tessa moved first, her practical strength a blur, as she knocked the guard's arm aside, sending his gun skittering across the floor. Kaelin lunged at Mirabel, her fist connecting with the woman's jaw before she could react. For Mom, Elliot grabbed Kaelin's arm, twisting it hard, but she spun, her knee slamming into his gut. He staggered, gasping, and for a moment, she saw fear in his eyes. Good. They fled the club. The ledger clutched to Kaelin's chest. Tessa covering their retreat with a stolen bottle of champagne swung like a club. The city swallowed them, its chaos a shield as they ran through alleys, their breaths sharp in the cold air. They'll come after us, Tessa panted, her eyes scanning the shadows. Kaelin nodded, her mind racing. Let them. We've got the trust. The ledger. They can't touch us now. But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. Elliot doesn't lose. Back at the building, they barricaded themselves in Kaelin's apartment. The ledger spread out on the table. Tessa's laptop glowed as she sent encrypted copies to Clara, to trusted contacts, to anyone who could expose Vorne Holdings. This goes public. They're done, Tessa said, her voice firm but tired. Kaelin stared at her mother's letter, the words blurring. Trust no one. She trusted Tessa, Clara, but the weight of her mother's warning lingered. Her phone buzzed. Text from Clara. Trust secure. FBI interested. Stay hidden. The next day, the city buzzed with news. Vorne Holdings was under investigation, the ledger's contents leaking to the press. Kaelin watched the reports on Tessa's laptop, her heart a mix of triumph and unease. Elliot and Mirabel were named, their faces plastered across screens. But they were gone, vanished into the city's underbelly. Kaelin's fingers traced the letter, her mother's words a lifeline. I'm sorry. Tessa's hand rested on her shoulder, her voice soft. You did it, Kaelin. For her. Kaelin's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. It's not over. Weeks later, Kaelin stood in her building's lobby, the walls freshly painted, the air clean for the first time in years, the trusts. Money was hers, funding repairs, new leases, a future her mother would have wanted. Tessa joined her, her practical smile warm. You're a landlord now. How's it feel? Kaelin's laugh was sharp, rare, like a fight I can win. But as she spoke, her phone buzzed. A photo, anonymous. Elliot and Mirabel, standing together in a foreign city, their eyes on the camera. A message family never forgets. Kaelin deleted the photo, her jaw tight. The city stretched out beyond the windows, vast and unforgiving. But she was ready. They'll come. Her mother's letter was in her pocket, a reminder of why she fought. She looked at Tessa, her voice steady, raw. Let them try. I'm a Vorne. The city hummed, waiting, as Kaelin stood tall, her building a fortress, her heart a weapon. No mercy. The city's heartbeat thrummed through the open window, a restless rhythm of horns and distant sirens as Kaelin Vorne stood in her refurbished apartment. The walls, once peeling, now gleamed with fresh paint, and the radiator hummed quietly, no longer hissing its complaints. Her building was a fortress now, bought with the trust her mother had hidden, secured, with the blood and sweat of her fight against Elliot Vorne and Mirabel Duskew. But the photo on her phone, the one she deleted weeks ago, lingered in her mind. Elliot and Mirabel standing together in some foreign city, their eyes mocking her through the lens. Family never forgets. Kaelin's fingers tightened around the edge of her mother's letter, tucked in her pocket like a talisman. She'd won the first war, but the air felt heavy, charged with the promise of another. They're coming back. Tessa Roque knocked on the doorframe, her blunt bob swinging as she leaned in, her practical voice cutting through Kaelin's thoughts. You're brooding again, she said, a half smile softening the jab. Kaelin's lips twitched, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the city beyond the glass. They're out there, Tessa. Planning. Tessa stepped inside, her boots scuffing the polished floor, a stack of papers in her hand. Found something you'll want to see. Vorne Holdings isn't dead, it's just gone quiet. Too quiet. Kaelin's mind snapped to attention, gears turning, analyzing. Elliot's too smart to give up. Mirabel's too cruel. The papers Tessa spread across the table were a patchwork of financial records, emails, and grainy surveillance stills. I had a friend at the bank dig into their offshore accounts, Tessa said, her finger jabbing at a highlighted line. Money's moving again. Small transfers, untraceable, but they're fumbling it somewhere new. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, tracing a name in the records, Crescent Enterprises. A front just like Vorne Holdings had been. Where's it going? She asked, her voice cold, detached. Tessa pulled up a map on her laptop. A pin dropped on a coastal town 3 hours north. Here. Blackwater Cove. Old industrial area. Mostly abandoned. They're buying up land. Kaelin's pulse quickened. A spark of rage beneath her calm. They're building something new. Without me in the way. Kaelin called Clara, her lawyer, who answered on the first ring, her voice sharp despite the late R. Blackwater Cove, Clara said, the sound of papers rustling in the background. That's no coincidence. I've got contacts up their small town, big secrets. If Elliot and Mirabel are moving, it's not just about money. Kaelin's grip on the phone tightened, her mother's letter heavy in her pocket. What's there? Why now? Clara's pause was heavy, deliberate. Rumor is, the town's sitting on something valuable. Land, maybe, or something buried. If they're involved, it's dirty. Kaelin's mind raced, calculating. They're not just running. They're hunting. The next morning, Kaelin and Tessa packed a car, the ledger and her mother's letter tucked into a locked case. The drive to Blackwater Cove was quiet. The highway cutting through fog-draped hills, the air growing colder as the city faded behind them. Kaelin's thoughts churned, her mother's warning echoing, trust no one. But Tessa's steady presence beside her was an anchor, her practical silence a reminder of their shared fight. The town emerged from the mist, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against a gray sea. The docks smelled of salt and rust, and the locals' eyes followed their car with guarded curiosity. Outsiders aren't welcome here. They checked into a rundown motel, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. Tessa hacked into the town's property records from her laptop, her fingers flying as Kaelin paced the small room. Crescent Enterprises owns half the waterfront, Tessa said, her voice tight. Warehouses, old factories. Their moving fast permits filed last week. Kaelin stopped, her eyes on the window, where the sea churned under a bruised sky. What are they building? Tessa's screen flashed with a blueprint, stolen from a planning office server. A complex, sprawling, with underground levels. This isn't just real estate, Tessa said. It's too secure, too hidden. Kaelin's mind clicked, piecing together fragments. Elliot and Mirabel hadn't just fled, they'd pivoted, their empire shifting to this forgotten town. But why? She thought of the ledger, of the hidden rooms in her building, of her mother's secrets. Whatever they were after, it was tied to her family, to the past they'd stolen. A knock at the door snapped her back, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife in her boot. Tessa's eyes met hers, a silent agreement. As Kaelin opened the door, a woman stood there, her face lined, her eyes sharp. "You're asking questions," she said, her voice low, weathered. "You need to stop." Kaelin's voice was ice, her hand still on the knife. "Who sent you?" The woman's gaze flicked to the street, where a black car idled in the fog. "You know who. They're watching." Tessa stepped forward, her practical calm a counterpoint to Kaelin's fire. "What do they want here?" The woman hesitated, then slipped a folded paper into Kaelin's hand. "Leave. Before you find out." She was gone before Kaelin could respond, the car vanishing into the mist. The paper was a map, hand-drawn, marking a warehouse on the edge of town. A single word was scrawled in the corner: vault. Kaelin's heart pounded, her mother's letter burning in her pocket. Another vault, another secret. Tessa's voice was steady, but her eyes were wary. "This is a trap." Kaelin nodded, her jaw tight. "I know, but we're going anyway." The warehouse loomed in the dark, its rusted walls groaning under the wind's assault. Kaelin and Tessa moved silently, their flashlights off, guided by the faint glow of the moon. The map led them to a side door, its lock old but sturdy. Tessa's lockpicks made quick work of it, her hands steady despite the tension. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil, the space vast and empty except for a concrete slab in the center, to clean. Kaelin's boots echoed as she approached, her eyes catching a seam in the floor. "Here," she whispered, kneeling. A trapdoor, bolted shut, with a keypad glowing faintly. Just like the last one, Kaelin entered the same code, her mother's birthday. The keypad beeped, red light flashing. She tried the deed's date. Another beep. Think. Her fingers hesitated, then entered her own birthday. The lock clicked, and the trapdoor hissed open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Tessa's hand gripped her arm, her voice low. "This is bad, Kaelin." Kaelin's eyes burned, her voice raw. "So, are they?" The ladder led to a concrete chamber, its walls lined with metal crates, each stamped with the Vorne Holdings logo. Kaelin's flashlight swept the room, catching glints of something else: files, photos, a laptop left open on a table. Tessa moved to the laptop, her fingers flying as she bypassed the password. "This is their hub," she said, her voice tight. "Shipping records, chemical compounds, offshore accounts. They're not just buying land, they're moving something illegal." Kaelin opened a crate, her breath catching. Vials filled with a clear liquid, labeled only with numbers. Drugs, weapons. Her mother's letter flashed in her mind. "Elliot will never stop." Footsteps echoed above, heavy and deliberate. Kaelin's hand went to her knife, her pulse steady despite the danger. Tessa closed the laptop, slipping it into her bag. We need to go, she whispered. But the trapdoor slammed shut, the keypad's light going dark. A voice crackled through a hidden speaker, Mirabel's, smooth and venomous. You're predictable. Darling, did you think we'd let you walk away? Kaelin's eyes met Tessa's, her voice a whisper of steel. We're not trapped, they are. The underground chamber was a tomb of concrete and steel, the air thick with the tang of rust and chemicals. Kaelin Vorne stood frozen, her knife in hand, as Mirabel Duskew's voice echoed through the hidden speaker, sharp and mocking. You're predictable, darling. Kaelin's eyes scanned the darkness, her mind slicing through the panic, calculating. The trapdoor above was sealed, the keypad dead, but she wasn't prey, not anymore. Tessa Roque crouched beside her, clutching the stolen laptop, her practical calm a lifeline. We need a way out, Tessa whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Kaelin nodded, her gaze locking on the crates of vials lining the walls. Whatever this is, it's their endgame. Kaelin moved to the crates, her flashlight catching the glint of the numbered vials. She pried one open, the liquid inside shimmering, faintly like mercury under moonlight. No labels, no clues, just a faint chemical scent that stung her nose. This isn't drugs, she said, her voice low, analytical. It's something else, something big. Tessa's fingers flew across the laptop, pulling up files from its drive. Shipping manifests, she said, her eyes narrowing. These vials are going overseas. High security transport. And look, Elliot's signature is on every order. Kaelin's jaw tightened, a spark of rage breaking through her calm. My uncle. Always him. The speaker crackled again, Elliot's voice now smooth and cold. You're digging your own grave. Kaelin, walk away, and we might let you live. Kaelin's laugh was sharp, raw, echoing in the chamber. You don't scare me, uncle. Tessa shot her a look, her practical voice cutting through. Don't taunt him. We're trapped. But Kaelin's mind was racing, mapping the room. The blueprint from Blackwater Cove's records flashed in her memory, underground levels. Service tunnels. There's always a way out. Kaelin's flashlight swept the walls, catching a faint outline, a panel, barely visible, hidden behind a stack of crates. She motioned to Tessa, who helped her shove the crates aside, revealing a rusted hatch. Service tunnel, Kaelin whispered, her fingers tracing the bolts. They didn't seal everything. Tessa's lockpicks were already out, her hands steady as she worked the lock. The hatch groaned open, revealing a narrow passage, its walls slick with damp. The air smelled of decay, but it was freedom. For now. They crawled through the tunnel, the laptop and a single vial tucked into Tessa's bag. The darkness pressed in, the sound of their breaths loud in the confined space. Kaelin's mind churned, piecing together the puzzle. Vials. Offshore accounts. Blackwater Cove. Her mother's letter burned in her pocket. Its warning clear. Elliot will never stop. She thought of the photo Elliot and Mirabel, watching her from across the world. They're not just hiding. They're building. The tunnel ended at a grate, the faint glow of moonlight seeping through. Tessa pushed it open, and they emerged into the night, the warehouse looming behind them like a sleeping beast. The town of Blackwater Cove was silent, its streets shrouded in fog. Kaelin and Tessa slipped through the shadows, heading back to the motel. The vial in Tessa's bag felt like a bomb, its contents a mystery that could destroy everything. We need to know what this is, Kaelin said, her voice cold, precise. Find a lab. Someone we can trust. Tessa nodded, her face grim. I know a guy in the city. Chemist. Off the grid. He'll analyze it, no questions. Kaelin's eyes flicked to the horizon, where the sea churned under a storm-heavy sky. Whatever they're planning, it ends with me. Back at the motel, Kaelin's phone buzzed a new message. Anonymous but unmistakable. A video, grainy but clear. The warehouse, moments after they'd escaped. Men in black gear moved through the chamber, their faces obscured, loading crates into a van. Mirabel's voice narrated, her tone venomous. You're fast, darling, but not fast enough. Leave the cove, or we'll bury you. Kaelin's hand shook, not with fear, but with fury. They think they can scare me. Tessa's voice was steady, practical. We need to move. They know we were there. Kaelin nodded, her mind already 3 steps ahead. We're not running. We're hunting. They drove through the night, the vial and laptop locked in the car's trunk, heading for the city and Tessa's chemist contact. The road was a ribbon of black, the fog thick, headlights barely cutting through. Kaelin's thoughts drifted to her mother, to the letter, to the life stolen by Elliot's greed. You fought them, Mom. I'm finishing it. Tessa's voice broke the silence, her eyes on the rearview mirror. We've got a tail. Black SUV, half a mile back. Kaelin's pulse spiked, her hand on the knife in her boot. Keep driving. Let them get close. The SUV gained, its headlights a predatory glare. Tessa floored the gas, the car lurching through the fog, but the SUV matched their speed, relentless. Kaelin's mind was a blade, cutting through options. Pull over, she said, her voice ice. We end this now. Tessa's eyes widened, but she obeyed, easing the car onto the shoulder. The SUV stopped behind them, its doors opening. 2 men emerged, their silhouettes sharp against the fog. Hale's men. Kaelin stepped out, her knife hidden, her face a mask of calm. Tell Elliot I'm done playing, she called, her voice carrying. The men didn't speak, their hands on weapons, but Kaelin was faster. She threw a rock, smashing their windshield, startling them. Tessa was out in a flash, her crowbar swinging, catching one man in the arm. Kaelin tackled the other, her knife at his throat. Where's Elliot? She hissed, her voice raw, breaking through her detachment. The man's eyes were wide, but he spat. You're dead, Vorne. Kaelin pressed the blade harder, drawing a thin line of blood. Wrong answer. Tessa's voice cut through, urgent. Kaelin, we've got what we need. Let's go. They left the men dazed on the road, the SUV's tires slashed for good measure. Back in the car, Tessa's hands shook on the wheel, but her voice was steady. That was reckless. Kaelin's lips curled, a rare smile. That was necessary. The city loomed ahead, its lights a beacon through the fog. They reached Tessa's contact by dawn a weary man named Leo, his lab a cluttered basement filled with humming machines. He took the vial, his eyes narrowing as he studied it. This'll take time, he said, his voice gruff, but it's no street drug. Looks experimental. Kaelin's mind raced, connecting dots, experimental chemicals, offshore accounts, Blackwater Cove's abandoned docks. They're not just criminals. They're playing with something dangerous. She thought of her mother, of the trust, of the building she'd fought to keep. This was bigger, darker, and she was in deep. Tessa's phone buzzed, a message from Clara. FBI's moving on Vorne Holdings. Need the vials analysis to seal the case. Kaelin's eyes met Tessa's, her voice cold, resolute. Then we wait, and when we have it, we bury them. But the wait was cut short. A crash echoed outside the lab, the sound of glass shattering, boots on concrete. Kaelin's hand went to her knife, her heart steady despite the danger. They found us. Tessa grabbed the laptop, her eyes scanning for an exit. Leo cursed, shoving the vial into a safe, back door. He hissed, pointing to a rusted exit. Kaelin led the way, her flashlight cutting through the dark. As shouts filled the lab behind them, Mirabel's voice carried, sharp and commanding. "Find them. Now."